There's a truth that has quietly walked beside you for many years now. Not because you lacked the courage to face it, but because you were so strong that the world chose silence instead of honesty with you. If you're an Aries, listen slowly, really slowly, because January 2026 is not an ordinary moment in time. It is the moment when the universe no longer allows Aries to keep holding back what has already waited too long to be spoken. A secret that can no longer stay hidden. Two paths, opening at the same time in front of you. And only one truth that can either free you from an old cycle or keep you there for many more years. In this video, you will understand why Aries in January 2026 stands at a decisive crossroads of destiny. Why everything you endured in silence is finally beginning to find its voice. And why this decision is no longer something you can avoid. If, deep inside you, a familiar feeling is rising, the feeling that it's time to live as your true self, then leave a very gentle confirmation below. I am ready to step onto my path of truth. A comment is not just words. It is your agreement with the current of universal energy that is guiding you back to the place your soul has always chosen. And to understand why all of this is happening so precisely to Aries, we need to return to where everything began, the irreplaceable nature of your soul. Aries does not enter the Zodiac to observe. You enter to begin. In astrology, Aries stands at the very beginning not by accident, but because some souls are born to ignite movement. When everything is still, when the world hesitates, when fear hangs over important choices, Aries is the first flame that sets the wheel of destiny in motion. Not loudly, not asking permission, but impossible to ignore. You are ruled by Mars, the planet of action, raw instinct, and truth that refuses to hide. Mars does not teach you to wait until everything feels safe. It does not whisper for you to be patient just a little longer. This energy asks you one direct question only. Do you dare to move when the truth is already alive in your heart? And that is why the life of Aries is rarely gentle. Not because you seek chaos, but because you were never meant to run from what must be faced. When injustice exists, when something is off, when falsehood lingers in the air, you feel it immediately. And the faster you feel it, the harder it becomes to pretend you are at peace. There is a defining quality in Aries that many people never fully understand. You act before the world agrees. You move before guarantees exist. You speak while others are still debating silence. Not because you are reckless, but because your soul cannot tolerate living against its own truth. Many Aries have been labeled hot-headed, impulsive, unpredictable. But with time, it becomes clear this is not loss of control. It is the natural response of a soul that refuses to accept what it knows is wrong. You do not react because you want conflict. You react because you cannot compromise with falsehood. Even when falsehood is disguised as safety. Many Aries grew up far too early. Not because you wanted to, but because life placed you in moments where you had to step forward before anyone else was ready. When a decision had to be made immediately. When a boundary had to be drawn. When a truth needed someone brave enough to speak it, even knowing the cost would be high. And because of that, many Aries carry a feeling that is difficult to name. Not exactly loneliness. Not exactly isolation, but a sense that you do not truly belong where you are standing. You may be in a family, in a group, in a familiar environment, yet deep inside, a quiet voice keeps saying, I'm not the same. Not because you are better, but because your heartbeat moves one step ahead of the world. While others are weighing gains and losses, you already feel you cannot wait. While others search for security, you know that if you do not move, you will betray yourself. And that inner tension is not easy to carry. There have been nights when Aries wondered, am I moving too fast? Should I slow down? Give it a little more? Endure a little longer so things don't fall apart? But Mars within you was never meant to sleep. And the soul of Aries was never meant to shrink. Those who walk first always face stronger resistance. They meet doubt. They accept being misunderstood in the moment they choose. There were times you moved forward without support. Times when your decisions made you seem different in the eyes of many. Yet history always proves one truth. Without those who step ahead, there is no road for others to follow. You may have silenced your true self to keep the peace. Chosen quiet, even while knowing something was wrong. Convinced yourself that if you tried just a little harder, everything would work out. But the heaviness never left. It only settled, waiting for the right moment to rise again with force. And some souls, after enduring long enough, are no longer allowed by the universe to remain silent. You were not born to please. You were born to explore places no one dared to enter, to break limits that no longer fit, to uncover yourself, each time choosing truth over comfort. But exploration is never a crowded journey. There are stretches you must walk alone, not because you were abandoned, but because you are ahead. If you're listening now and realizing how many times you have suppressed your inner voice, how often you questioned whether you were allowed to live as your true self, pause for a moment, not to doubt yourself, but to understand this. That feeling is not weakness. It is the sign that you have lived too long in the role of the one who endures. If these words touch something inside you, leave a very gentle sign. Maybe just one simple sentence. I recognize this. Not to explain yourself to anyone, but to quietly admit to yourself that you are hearing the call within. Because when Aries begins to truly listen to themselves again, nothing around them can remain the same. Relationships shift. Environments change. Social roles begin to move. Not to punish you, but to return you to the place your soul has always belonged. And this is exactly why, as January 2026 arrives, the energy surrounding Aries is no longer about trying to adapt. It becomes the energy of being required to choose. When Mars is powerfully activated, what was hidden, what was delayed, what was avoided begins to surface. Not loudly, but unmistakably. If you feel something inside you growing stronger, a sense that you can no longer live halfway, trust this. It is not impulsiveness. It is the ancient call of the pioneer soul within you. That call does not come to disrupt your life. It comes to prepare you for a much greater turning point. And when a pioneering soul has traveled far enough, the truth can no longer be concealed. From that moment on, two paths begin to appear more clearly than ever before. There are times in life when silence is not because we don't know, but because we know too well, and we hope that if we are patient enough, everything will eventually change on its own. Many Aries have lived through years like this. You see that something is no longer right. You sense the misalignment in a relationship, an environment, a role you are carrying. But you choose silence, not out of fear, but because you believe in the goodness of people, because you believe someone will understand, because you believe circumstances will correct themselves, because you believe things will return where they are meant to be. That silence is not weakness. It comes from loyalty, from responsibility, from a desire to preserve what matters. But there is one truth the universe never stops reminding us of. Silence only has value when it heals. When silence begins to make you smaller, more exhausted, further away from yourself, that silence is no longer peace. As January 2026 approaches, the energy surrounding Aries changes at a very deep level. Not loudly, not violently, but irreversibly. Pluto completes a long cycle of influence over your identity and your soul mission. This is not the kind of movement that causes everything to collapse at once. It is the kind of energy that makes it impossible to keep pretending you haven't seen the truth. What was carefully hidden? What was buried beneath responsibility, duty, and very reasonable explanations begins to become clearer in your awareness. You don't need anyone to point it out. You don't need obvious proof. In one quiet moment, you simply know. You know that certain things no longer fit the person you have become. You know that some truths were once valid in the past, but if you keep carrying them forward, they will turn into a burden. You know that not everyone betrayed you, but not everyone can walk with you into the next chapter. This can be especially difficult for Aries to accept because you love fully. When you give trust, you give it completely. When you stay, you stay until the very end. So admitting that something must change can feel like you're betraying the very values you hold sacred. But the truth does not come to wound you. The truth comes to liberate you. You may have told yourself, just stay silent a little longer. Try a little harder. Endure a little more, and everything will be fine. But deep inside, a part of you grows increasingly tired. Not because life is too harsh, but because you're forcing yourself to maintain a version of yourself that no longer fits. And what makes Pluto so powerful is that it does not tolerate half-truths. When this energy completes its cycle, what is no longer authentic begins to reveal itself. Not through dramatic events, but through a quiet inability to keep looking away. You may notice it in very small moments. A harmless comment that leaves you silent for a long time. A familiar action that suddenly feels empty. A repeated situation that makes you realize you have been giving far too much to something that no longer nourishes you. If you feel your heart grow heavy listening to this, trust that it is not negativity. It is honesty knocking at the door. And there are souls who, once mature enough, are no longer allowed by the universe to avoid that honesty. If this resonates with you, leave a very gentle sign. Maybe just a single question: what have I been silent about for too long? You don't need to answer it now. Just allow the question to stay with you. Because once the question appears, the answer is already closer than you think. Many Aries in this phase of life begin to feel an invisible pressure. No one is forcing you to speak. No one is demanding that you act. And yet, deep inside, you know that if you remain silent much longer, you will lose something very important, a part of yourself. What makes this period so powerful is not that the truth is being revealed to others. It's that you can no longer hide the truth from yourself. Maybe it's the truth about a relationship that has quietly changed. Maybe it's the truth about a path you're walking out of habit, not desire. Maybe it's the truth that you have outgrown the role you've been carrying. That truth is not loud. It doesn't force you to cut ties immediately. It simply stands there, steady, clear, unshakable, waiting for you to be brave. Enough to acknowledge it. If you're in this space right now, remember this. You are not being pushed out of your comfort zone. You are being invited into a more truthful one. And this invitation fits the Aries soul perfectly. Because you were never born to live inside spaces that have grown too small. You were born to open pathways, not only for the world, but for yourself. If these words mean something to you, consider liking this video or sharing it with someone who also feels they can know. Longer stay silent, not to convince them, but to let them know that this feeling is real and that they are not alone. Because when truth begins to surface, it doesn't only bring clarity, it brings a choice. And that is when everything begins to shift. When the truth can no longer be hidden, when silence is no longer allowed, two paths slowly begin to appear. One familiar path, where you know you must continue to endure, and one new path, where you don't yet know what's waiting, but you know you will be living more honestly. From that moment on, the journey of Aries enters a new chapter. A chapter where choice is no longer something that can be postponed. Because once the truth has spoken, the universe quietly waits to see which direction you will step toward. When the truth is no longer hidden, something very natural begins to happen. Not a crisis, not an immediate decision, but the feeling of standing before two paths, coexisting in a very quiet moment. Many Aries sense this without anyone needing to explain it. You're still there. Life continues. On the outside, nothing seems drastically different. But inside, you know with certainty that you are no longer standing in the same place as before. In astrology, this is the moment when the first house, 10th house axis is strongly activated. The first house speaks of who you truly are, your instincts, the feeling of this is me when no one is watching. The 10th house speaks of social roles, public image, responsibility, what the world expects of you, and what it places upon your shoulders. When this axis shifts, you begin to feel the difference between who you are and who you are being seen as. And right here, the two paths become visible. One path is very familiar. The path of safety built slowly over time. On this path, you know exactly what to do to be accepted. You understand the rules. You know how to keep everything under control. This path is not wrong. It once protected you. It helped you survive. It gave you stability when you needed it most. But beside it, another path begins to appear. Unclear, without detailed signs, offering no promise of familiar safety. Yet it carries a very different feeling, the feeling of breathing in your own natural rhythm. That path does not call out loudly. It does not pressure you. It simply exists quiet, honest, real. And every time you think of it, your heart responds with a small but unmistakable vibration. Many Aries try to ignore this feeling, not because they don't recognize it, but because they understand the cost of stepping onto a new path. Change is not just a change of circumstances. It is a change in how you are seen, how you are understood, how you are named in this world. And what makes Aries hesitate is not fear of change itself. You are not afraid of that. What makes you pause is the fear that when you move forward, no one may truly understand you anymore. There were times when you built a very solid image in the eyes of others. The strong one, the one who carries the weight, the one who always goes first, the one who never asks for help. And that image once earned your respect. But there comes a moment when that image turns into a tight garment. Not because it was wrong, but because you have outgrown it. Staying in safety is not something to be ashamed of. Some souls stay to complete a role they are meant to fulfill. Some people choose stability because that is where they are learning the lessons they still need. But for Aries, the question is not whether to stay or to leave. The real question is this: have you already recognized the truth inside yourself? Because once you know, once you feel it, once you can no longer lie to yourself, staying is no longer a neutral choice. It quietly becomes a form of self-denial. And the most dangerous loss is not what disappears on the outside. It is the gradual loss of trust in yourself. Every time you stay silent a little longer, every time you choose safety, while knowing deep inside that you no longer belong there, you send yourself a heavy message. My inner knowing is not important. Mars and Aries cannot tolerate that message for long, because your soul was born to trust its instincts. And when the first house, 10th house axis is activated, the universe begins placing you in situations that force you to look directly at this difference. It may come as an unexpected opportunity, a proposal that leaves you uncertain, an event that makes you realize you no longer want to play the old role. Not because that role was beneath you, but because it no longer reflects who you truly are. If you're listening now and feel that familiar inner struggle, pause for a moment. Ask yourself quietly, without needing to answer anyone else, what is really keeping me here? Is it responsibility? The fear of disappointing others? Or the fear that if you move forward, nothing will remain the same? If this question touches you, leave a very gentle sign. Maybe just one sentence. I am standing between two paths. Not to decide right now, but to acknowledge that this moment is real. Because moments like this do not come many times in a lifetime. And for Aries, they always carry great meaning. The new destined path does not promise ease, but it promises truth. You may not always be understood, but you will no longer have to betray yourself to be accepted. And this matters deeply in the context of January 2026, because the energy of this time does not allow postponement, not because the universe is forcing you, but because delay only makes the inner conflict heavier. When a soul has already seen its path, pretending not to see only makes each step more exhausting. If these words resonate with you, consider liking or sharing this video with someone else who is also standing before a major life choice. Not to tell them which direction to take, but to let them know that confusion is a natural part of growth. Because when Aries stands between old safety and new destiny, it is not a sign of being lost. It is a sign that you are very close to a more truthful version of yourself. And that is why January 2026 does not allow further delay. Because once the two paths are clear enough, the universe no longer asks whether you are ready. It quietly waits to see which way you will step. There are moments in life when you know you have reached a boundary. Not a physical one, but a boundary of the soul. January 2026 carries exactly that feeling for Aries. Not loud, not dramatic, but deep enough for you to know there is no returning to the way things were before. You may still wake up each morning, still do familiar tasks, still speak ordinary words, but inside, something has shifted. A different rhythm appears, a feeling that if you continue living the same way, you will slowly drift away from yourself. In astrology, this is when Mars, the ruling planet of Aries, enters a state that no longer allows delay. Mars is not the planet of force. It is the planet of action born from truth. And when this energy is strongly activated, everything that was pushed into later, everything postponed, everything avoided begins to return, knocking steadily, clearly, again and again. No more when it feels more convenient. No more, just wait a little longer. No more perfectly reasonable excuses to postpone living your truth. Because there are moments when choosing not to act doesn't just mean missing an opportunity. It means missing yourself. Many Aries feel a very specific kind of pressure during this time. Not pressure from the outside, not because anyone is pushing you, but pressure that comes from seeing too clearly to pretend you don't know anymore. You know how much of your life you're truly living. You know which relationships you're holding onto out of responsibility. You know which roles you continue to carry for social image, not because your soul still wants to be there. And the clearer you see, the harder it becomes to keep playing the part. There may have been a time when you believed endurance was noble, that silence was maturity, that sacrificing yourself a little to keep everything peaceful was the right thing to do. But January 2026 brings a very different truth. Long-term endurance does not create peace. It only creates exhausted souls. And the universe does not need more exhausted souls. The universe needs people who live honestly. This is not a punishment, not a crisis sent to take something away from you. This is a serious, loving awakening call, one that cannot be ignored. Because when Mars acts, it does not destroy for the sake of destruction. It breaks down what is no longer needed so the core can finally live. You may have feared that living honestly would cost you everything. Acceptance, stability, long-standing relationships. But the deeper truth that January 2026 reveals is this. You lose nothing by living honestly. You only lose what was never truly yours. Anything built on pretense cannot follow you into the next chapter. Anything that requires you to shrink yourself to maintain it will eventually become a burden. And this truth extends beyond Aries. It applies to society itself. A community can only grow when people dare to live by their values. Falsehood drags the collective backward. Silence in the face of what is wrong turns the wrong into something normal. And pioneers like Aries were not born to preserve what no longer fits. You may notice that during this period, everything seems to move faster. Small events carry great meaning. Casual words strike the very thing you have been trying to avoid. Opportunities appear right when you are most uncertain. This is not coincidence. This is the universe asking you a very clear question. Will you continue living to be accepted, or will you begin living to be yourself? If you're listening now and feel your heart grow heavy, it may be because you have stayed too long in a version of yourself that no longer fits. Not because you were wrong, but because you have outgrown that place. January 2026 does not push you out of your comfort zone. It simply removes the feeling of comfort from it. And when that happens, you cannot return to the way things were. Because once you have seen the truth, pretending to be blind is what hurts the soul the most. If these words resonate with you, consider liking or sharing this video. Not to spread fear, but to spread the energy of courage and honesty. Because out there, many people are standing at the same threshold you are. They just haven't found the words yet. You may be wondering now, if I step forward, what waits on the other side? Will the new path be easier? Will I regret it? No one can answer that for you. Not even astrology. Astrology does not make decisions for you. It only reveals the moment when your soul can no longer delay. And January 2026 is that moment. Not every decision must be made immediately, but some truths must be acknowledged. Now, some boundaries must be redrawn. Some words must be spoken, not to wound others, but to end self-deception. When Aries crosses the point of no return, you do not become someone else. You simply return closer to who you have always been. Still strong, still bold, still willing to step forward. But this time, you're no longer fighting to prove anything to the world. You're acting to honor yourself. And from that moment on, life no longer moves on its old momentum. New doors begin to appear. New relationships reflect who you truly are more clearly. New opportunities, aligned with your real values, slowly find their way to you. Not because you're trying to attract them, but because you're no longer sending out a false signal. And this is the question that January 2026 places before Aries. Not for you to answer immediately, but to let it stay with you, to guide you through the days ahead. Once you have crossed the point of no return, where does this truth lead you? And do you have the courage to walk that path to the end, even if it no longer resembles any road you have ever traveled before? There is something very subtle that many Aries only realize after they have gone far enough. The truth you are facing is not really about someone else, not entirely about a relationship, a circumstance, or an external story. At its deepest level, this truth is about the role of your soul. For a long time, you may have believed you were simply reacting to circumstances, that you had to change because of others, that you were forced to choose because life pushed you into a corner. But when everything quiets down enough for you to hear your inner voice again, something very clear begins to emerge. You cannot remain still anymore. Not because the world has changed, but because you're no longer the same person. This truth is not loud. It does not require declaration. It simply exists, steady, calm, like an inner anchor you can no longer ignore. Not everyone needs to know where you're going. Not everyone will understand the reasons behind your changes. And not everyone needs an explanation. But there is one person who absolutely must know. That person is you. You need to understand why you can no longer stay where you are. Why what once felt enough now feels constricting. Why roles that once brought pride now leave you exhausted. And why, every time you try to return to your old way of living, a heavy feeling settles in your chest. One that is hard to name. Many Aries once believed that maturity meant understanding everything. Understanding others. Understanding circumstances. Understanding why things unfolded the way they did. And so you worked very hard to rationalize the things that hurt you. But at a certain stage, you realize maturity is not about understanding everything. Maturity is about no longer deceiving yourself. You stop saying, "I'm fine," when you're clearly drained inside. You stop calling endurance a responsibility. You stop calling silence noble when it costs you your sense of self. And this is where the truth begins to reveal its many layers. On the surface, it may be the truth about another person, a relationship that is no longer balanced, an environment that no longer reflects your values, a path that has already completed its purpose in your life. But at a deeper level, this truth speaks of the expansion of your soul, that you have outgrown old frameworks, that you are no longer here to keep living within familiar limits, that something inside you is asking to step into the light. You did not come here to live smaller, not to shrink yourself to fit other people's expectations, not to dim your light so no one feels uncomfortable, not to repeat a role just because it once felt safe. The soul of Aries was not born to shrink. It was born to initiate, to open pathways to awaken. And as you begin to feel this, fear may rise alongside it. Not because the road ahead is dangerous, but because that road requires full responsibility for yourself. No more blaming circumstances. No more hiding behind roles. No more living by reasons that sound reasonable but no longer align with your heart. This is why this truth has many layers. With every layer you touch, you move closer to your most authentic self. If you are listening now and feel a gentle vibration in your heart, It may be because your soul has been whispering this for a long time. Only now, you are quiet enough to hear it clearly. Ask yourself one question without answering it for anyone else. Have you ever felt that you were born for something greater? Not greater in a loud way. Not greater in a way that demands recognition. But greater in the sense that you know you can no longer live superficially with yourself. If this question touches you, leave a very gentle sign. Maybe just one sentence, I feel this. Not to prove anything, but to acknowledge that you are hearing the call within. Because when Aries begins to live in alignment with their soul's true role, everything around them slowly rearranges. Not immediately, but with remarkable precision. Relationships that are no longer aligned naturally drift away. Opportunities that fit you more truthfully begin to appear. New people enter your life, reflecting more accurately who you are becoming. Not because you go looking for them, but because you're no longer sending out a distorted signal. And from here, the journey of Aries moves into a deeper layer. No longer just a choice between safety and change, but a choice to live in alignment with the mission your soul carries. Because when the truth is seen at its deepest level, it is no longer just a personal decision. It becomes a very clear invitation from the universe. And that is what leads us to the deeper mission of Aries. There is something important that not every Aries realizes at first. You did not come here only to complete your own life. Some souls are born to enjoy. Some souls are born to stabilize. And some souls are born to open doors. Aries belongs to that last group. In astrology, you stand at the beginning of the Zodiac not to claim a position, but to activate movement, so that when you step forward, the world behind you suddenly has a path to follow. Many Aries once believed they were simply trying to live true to themselves. But the farther you go, the more you realize your choices affect far more than just you. When you dare to say what needs to be said, others begin to find their own voice. When you dare to leave an old structure, others realize they also have the right to change. When you dare to live honestly, you quietly give permission for those around you to live more honestly too. You don't need a stage to do this. You don't need titles or recognition. Simply living in truth is enough to send ripples very far. The world has never changed because people waited until everything felt safe. The world changes because of those who step forward, even when no one understands them yet, even when no applause is heard, even when they must face doubt, criticism, or long stretches of loneliness. And that is what makes the Aries journey so challenging. Not because you chose wrong, but because you chose to go first. There were times you wondered why you always carried responsibility earlier than others, why you were always the first to speak, why you were labeled too direct, too honest, too intense. But when you look deeper, you see that your honesty open conversations that no one else dared to begin. Courage is not only a personal quality. When lived authentically, courage becomes a gift to society. When one person steps out of fear, they don't just free themselves. They create space for others to breathe. They prove that fear is not the end point. And sometimes, simply witnessing one person live truthfully gives another the strength to stop running. You may not immediately see the impact you are making. You may not know that someone is quietly watching how you live. But trust this, even in silence, your energy is doing its work. You're not lost. You are leading, not through commands, not through theories, but through your willingness to take responsibility for your truth. And what makes Aries unique is that you do not open doors with promises. You open them with action, by stepping through first, by accepting risk so others may walk through more safely later. If you are listening now and realize that you have often had to be stronger than necessary, that you have stepped forward when no one else was ready, allow yourself to see that differently. Not as a burden, but as a soul role you accepted very early. You do not need to save the entire world, but simply by living honestly, the world around you has already begun to change. If this touches you, leave a very simple sign. I choose the path of truth, not to prove anything to anyone else, but but to confirm to yourself that you are ready to keep moving forward, even if the road ahead is no longer crowded like before. Because when Aries lives in alignment with their true mission, you don't just step into a new chapter of your personal life. You help reshape how people understand courage, honesty, and the value of living true to one's soul. And finally, before we move on, there is something very important I want to share with you. Not as advice, not as a prediction, but as a gentle, honest confirmation of what is waiting for you ahead. Before closing this journey, I want to slow down for a moment and thank you. Thank you for staying until the very end. Thank you for listening with your heart, not just your ears. Thank you for having the courage to look directly at yourself, even when the truth is not always comfortable. Not everyone is willing to walk all the way through a message like this. Not everyone is still enough to hear the call within. And the fact that you are here already says so much about who you are. Remember this one important thing. January 2026 takes nothing away from you. It does not come to strip you of anything. It does not come to punish. It does not come to make you lose. It comes only to return you to yourself. The version that was once restrained. The version that stayed silent to keep the peace. The version that made itself smaller so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. And when you are brave enough to choose truth, even if only in your very first thought, even if only in a small decision, life begins to choose you. Doors that were once closed begin to open. People who fit you more naturally start to appear. Opportunities aligned with your true frequency gradually find you. Not because you chase them, but because you're no longer running from yourself. If this video touched you, if a sentence, a moment, or a feeling made your heart stir, press like as a quiet confirmation that you received this message. And share this video if you sense that somewhere out there, someone else is standing at the same threshold you once stood. Because sometimes one message at the right moment can change an entire direction. And if you haven't already, stay with this channel. Not because of me, but because the journey of Aries does not end here. What is opening ahead is deeper, clearer, and carries gifts that perhaps you once never allowed yourself to hope for. Because after the truth is revealed, after you choose to stand on your own side, life no longer has any reason to keep things small. And I truly believe that what is coming next for you will help you understand why everything before this had to happen exactly the way it did. Thank you for choosing to listen, for choosing to stay, and for choosing your own path of truth.